What is the Bible? Well, the Bible is a collection of 66 books, 39 in the Old Testament and 27 in the New, that are all ultimately detailing for us in three different genres of literature man's dealings with God and vice versa. So, in the Old Testament, which mainly focuses on the nation of Israel, we see God's dealings with mankind in a sense that was setting up the prophecies that would predict Messiah's coming. The New Testament simply states that he came, and this is how he demonstrated it, referencing those Old Testament prophecies. The genres of literature are history, poetry, and prophecy, telling you what happened, expressing human expression and language regarding what happened, and of course, God's perspective on what happened. That would be prophecy. It's also worth noting that in these genres of literature, they're not just localized to a specific location, area, group, or language. There's over 40 different authors of the 66 books we recognize as the Bible, literally the books in Anglican, that would, of course, not only stem from different perspectives, but also in three different continents and three different languages, Hebrew, Greek, and Aramaic. And noting that this complete testimony of people who were claiming to have this perspective on God weren't just communicating this consistently across 1,500 years of human history, but according to the Bible itself, these books were set apart in the Hebrew culture to not only express their view of God, but that God himself was expressing himself, so that our views were informed from a first-hand perspective. We don't believe they were wholly possessed and that God just sort of took over as they were writing, but the scriptures say that God moved through these people, inspiring what details to emphasize and what to leave out in order for them to have a proper understanding of what God is like, his attitude towards us, and how to have a relationship with him. The Bible ultimately details all of that information. It is the final authority for Christians regarding what God is and isn't like, and while there are ambiguous or difficult to understand terms, the majority of the things of Scripture are the plain things of Scripture. The fundamentals, of course, are centered around that. And it's not too difficult to grasp, but when people spiritualize these things, that's when it gets needlessly complicated. The reality is, with a careful consideration of the genre, the context historically of when these things were written, and the overall flow of the passages themselves, the Bible can be plainly understood as a reliable revelation of God's character. It's also worth noting that those prophecies didn't just speak of future events before they happened, but also accurate events, analyzing and assessing the nature of man as honestly, or rather, not as honestly as we would like, in the world we live in today. So as these men and women were all inspired by God to write down these books, they were tested and compiled according to the standard of Moses, who was the first person God used in history, specifically in writing, to reveal his nature, and we call those books the Bible today.